All right, guys, let's rock and roll into our very last section of anatomy, which is visual field defects. As you jump into this section, one of the first things and most obvious things I want you to know is when you think about visual field defects, you want to know pits, okay? And every time you say pits, visual field defects. You want to say parietal gives you an inferior visual field defect. A temporal lobe lesion gives you a superior visual field defect. Always say pits, visual field defects. That way you won't get confused on boards. If you think parietal, does that mean inferior fibers are damaged? No. Parietal lobe lesion means there's an inferior, right, visual field defect. Temporal lobe lesion gives you a superior visual field defect. When you look back at the drawing I gave you guys, you would see that the inferior fibers are what coursed into the temporal lobe, right? That's why you have a superior defect if you have a lesion in the temporal lobe, right? So be able to understand that. Do you guys remember when I drew that diagram, do you remember the knee of Willebrand, the inferior fibers, the inferior nasal fibers, where did they go? They coursed up, right, into that left optic nerve. And you're going to see that's handy in a second when we talk about a junctional scotoma. But I'm going to warm you up right now by just kind of drawing a few different defects and seeing if you can kind of figure out where the lesion will be located. So guys, if you take a look at this picture, you remember that nasal fibers are going to cross. We're just going to make it super easy as we sketch it. Temporal fibers are not, right? So if this is our chiasm, obviously right here, okay? The big principle you want to get that's really, obvious and easy to you, but I'm going to show it to you in a second, is anything behind the chiasm right here is going to create a homonymous visual field defect. Anything behind the chiasm. It's going to affect both eyes, and it's going to create a homonymous visual field defect. What I'm going to tell you in a second is if it's right behind the chiasm, okay, like for example, let's say the defect, I'm going to put this in red, okay, is just right behind the chiasm, like over here in the optic tract, that's going to create a situation where it's homonymous, yes, but it's not congruous. As opposed to if the defect, okay, if the pathway goes around like this, if the defect's back here in the occipital lobe where the fibers are really close together, it's going to be homonymous because everything below the chiasm is homonymous. I'm just going to put that right there. Now the question is it congruous or non-congruous? If it's way far back, it's congruous. If it's up here, non-congruous. Okay, that's a little oversimplified, but that's kind of the way to think about it. Okay, if you have a defect that's only in one eye, that means it has to be in front of the chiasm by definition. Okay, and that's going to respect the horizontal midline. Stuff that's behind the chiasm, behind here, is going to be homonymous. It's going to respect the vertical midline. So let me give you some examples. Okay, guys, in this top half, I want to show you an example. If they gave you a visual field defect in the left eye that looked like this, okay, and the right eye that looked like that, my question, first of all, is that homonymous? You guys would say, yep, it's homonymous, no question. Okay, and then if I asked you, is it congruous? You guys would say, yep, it's congruous, no question, right? Congruous means they have the same shape, right? And as you look at that, you think that defect is probably really far back in the pathway. Like as far back as you could go would be the occipital lobe, and that would be an example of that, okay? Now if I gave you this, and I said, where is the lesion located? Right off the bat, you guys know it affects both eyes, right? Is it homonymous? Yes, it's homonymous. Is it congruous? You guys would say, no, it's not congruous. Right? And in that situation, okay, then you know it's behind the chiasm, right? But it must be just right behind the chiasm, okay? That's how you can kind of process how they could ask a question like that, okay? That's a simple way to kind of think about homonymous and congruous. All right, guys, so let's say this is your patient. You're looking at the right visual field. And let's say it comes out something like this, okay? As soon as you see that, you're looking at that, and close your left eye right now as you look at that. You're seeing that there's a defect in the inferior nasal portion of your right eye. That's a nasal step, right? As that extends from here and extends across, now it's no longer a nasal step. It's an arcuate defect, okay? And arcuate is just an extension of a nasal step, okay? If this patient came in and just had a problem only in the right eye, let's change this to this. This whole right eye was just awful, right? And the left eye was fine. Where would this lesion be located? Well, by definition, you know, since only one eye is affected, it has to be in front of the chiasm, no question, okay? That's another kind of simple way to process that type of defect that you could get on boards. If they presented a similar scenario like this, right eye comes in looking like this, okay? This is OD. And let's say this is what the left eye looks like. Is that homonymous, guys? Nope, homonymous means it's on the same side, right? This is nasal defects in both eyes. So if they asked you statistically what would be the number one cause of this, a nasal defect in both eyes like that would very likely be glaucoma, right? Because the glaucoma would be the number one cause of something anterior to the chiasm, right? You guys also know a BRAO could affect a patient like this, okay? So watch out for that on boards as well. But by definition, something that respects the horizontal midline like this is going to be something that's anterior to the chiasm and typically in the nerve fiber layer. Okay guys, let's see what you got on this one. Okay, patient comes in and this is going to be the right visual field, okay, the right eye. I'm just going to put R for right. I know you're more sophisticated than that. I mean, come on, we're at the end of anatomy. I could at least put OD, right? Let's put L for left right there. Patient comes in and in their right eye, the superior temporal portion of their field is messed up. And in the left eye, the very central portion of the defect is messed up. Okay, central portion of their vision is messed up. You guys know this is a what? It's a junctional scotoma. Junctional scotoma. Okay? There's nothing else that looks like that. So if you ever see it in a patient, you'd be like, wow, I've got that in my chair today. When you guys look at that, why does a patient have a visual field defect in the superior temporal portion of the right eye? Why is that? The reason you know that is because that must mean inferior nasal fibers from the right eye got nicked, right? And they did. And that's the neobrand. You remember that? These inferior nasal fibers course down and they loop up in behind the left optic nerve. And so, the question I think they would ask if they were going to go after one would be, they would show you something like that and say, where is the lesion? And you guys know junctional scotomas are right at the chiasm, but they're a little bit leaned toward one side. And so if you ever see that, make sure whichever eye has the central defect, that's where the lesion is leaned toward that side. So if they asked you that on boards, you would say left chiasm, the left side of the chiasm where the defect would be located, okay? Guys, make sure you kind of jump into visual field defects head first. I think this will get asked. Again, it's just my opinion, our team's opinion, based on the fact it is on the outline here. There's some neuro stuff later we're gonna cover as well. We'll jump into some more issues of the visual field at that time, but this is one I think it's a hot spot, so we want to take some extra time to make sure we kind of gave the big picture, drew out the pathway, and also talked about different hot spots for defects. So guys, congratulations. This is a big deal for all of us. Having done anatomy now, we got that out of the way. The great thing about getting anatomy done is anatomy is a foundation for everything. So we spent a lot of time on these videos really making sure that we've got that foundation set because it's going to serve us well as we get into physiology. By the way, when you get into physiology, which is next, so get going on that right away. Just keep rolling. Just binge watch it, baby. Just get into this stuff and just keep rolling. When you get into physiology, you're going to be like, dang, I remember him talking about this. Like a lot of this is just repetition, right? You're going to see the foundation's already been laid for that. And after you get done with physiology, you're going to see, man, your anatomy and physiology are rock solid. Now your disease is going to be easier. Pharm's going to be easier, right? So I don't know if you guys are feeling it right now, but what we're doing is building the momentum, baby, building the rhythm to make everything else easier, and it all starts with this. So if you've made it through it and you're enjoying this, or even if you're not, just keep pushing because your life's going to get easier and easier. So thanks for hanging in there, and we'll see you on the next video.